Scrapers, chisels, grinders, chemicals that burn your skin. If you've ever had to remove years of anti-fouling paint, you know just what I'm talking about. There has to be a better way. Hi everybody, I'm Tim Cole, publisher of Practical Sailor magazine, the independent, ad-free publication that has been testing and reporting on boats and sailing gear for more than 40 years. One of our specialties is anti-fouling paint. Each year we publish a report that highlights the best and worst bottom paints available, and over the years we've looked at nearly every concoction that claims to keep barnacles away. We've also tested various methods of removing bottom paint. It's an ugly job that can pose some real health risks if you're not careful. When I recently bought First Light, a 1978 Bristol 35.5, I faced a common scenario. First, I wanted to make sure the bottom paint wasn't hiding any blisters, the notorious pocks that afflict gel coat on boats of this vintage. Second, I wanted a waterproof epoxy barrier coat to keep moisture out of the hull laminate. Finally, I wanted to raise the waterline to keep slime from growing on the top sides when First Light is loaded for cruising. Although I like to work on my own boat, I recognize that I had neither the time nor the expertise for a project of this scope. In this short video, Ted Anderson, a marine professional from Stratford, Connecticut, describes the method he used to restore the bottom of First Light to better than new condition. Ted was kind enough to join us for an afternoon shortly after the project was completed. If you're intent on carrying out the work yourself, at the end of this video you'll find web links to Practical Sailor reports that will put you on the right path.
Okay. This job began with sandblasting the bottom of the hull. The boat was tarped out and most of the sand was contained and recollected for an environmental reason. The boatyard where we were working at requires that anything that comes off of the boat be collected and filtered or cleaned and not be allowed to go into any of the wastewater runoff. So in this case, you'll see in this picture the boat's been tarped out and there's two layers of tarp, one layer under the other, and they get duct taped to the hull so there's no leakage. There's also a ground tarp that they'll use to collect and vacuum and push broom off of. Here you can see what the bottom looked like after it was sandblasted. It actually leaves a fair amount of residue. The green and the blue that we see in this picture are different layers of bottom paint. The sandblaster doesn't go all the way down to the fiberglass. He doesn't want to create work for us. So what he does is he stops right before we get too far, and I'll come in with an 80 grit or 60 grit sandpaper and smooth that out. It's actually really soft and chalky, and it comes off really easy. The first product that we applied during the filling process is the Interlux watertight epoxy filler. This product is very hard and durable. It's good for the application because it is an epoxy, but it is not easy to sand. The epoxy is nice because the barrier coat that we use is also an epoxy, so they adhere to each other very well. The barrier coat is Interlux Interprotect Epoxy Primer, and in this case we used it in the no sand system. So after we've applied the watertight epoxy filler and sanded it smooth, we were able to roll coat and hot coat the Interprotect Primer one after another with no sanding in between. The primer went on thick and did a nice job of filling in any voids that we had left over from the watertight filler process. We were able to apply the primer extra thick where we didn't fill the holes all the way, and it filled up what we hadn't gotten done in the first place. The Interlux family is made to work with itself, so as we got into the anti-fouling, we used Micron Extra. What we had to do was wait on the last coat of barrier coat. The barrier coat is open to itself almost indefinitely, but only open to anti-fouling for 12 hours. So what we did was apply 4 coats of the barrier coat, and then the 5th coat we applied the morning of the anti-fouling and put our first coat of anti-fouling on in the afternoon. This makes it open to itself and makes it so we don't have to do any sanding. Micron Extra was a logical choice for us using here in Long Island Sound because of the warmer water temperatures and the higher algae content. The Micron Extra has a biocide in it that works really well in this area. It's also a little bit firmer than some of the other paints, which means that it wears harder and you get a longer season out of it. You know, there's 5 major points that a do-it-yourselfer could take away from this project. The first and most important and most valuable point is adhesion. And you got to make sure that you sand off or sandblast off any old paint that isn't adhered to the bottom. On this boat, we had a lot of flaking paint, even at the waterline, that hadn't adhered properly. And we were very scrutinous about making sure that every last bit of flaky paint had been removed. Furthermore, you take that one step farther, you want to make sure that you wipe off any kind of residual dust, oil, wax, or blush, so that when you do apply that first coat of barrier coat, it is adhered as well as it can. You make sure that the air temperature is within the manufacturer's specs, make sure the humidity is within manufacturer's specs, and that you have plenty of time. The second most important part of a project like this is planning out your schedule, making sure that you have the time to apply Inner Protect when it needs to be applied, and make sure that you have the time to apply the anti-fouling when it needs to be applied. In this case, we said that the Inner Protect is open to itself for a long time, but it's not open to itself for a year. So you need to make sure that you come back during the manufacturer's window and reapply the second coat, the third coat, and all the following coats, or else you'll be stuck sanding in between each coat. And that's going to drastically lengthen the amount of time that this project takes. A third very valuable point is to take your time and hire somebody to come in and sandblast the bottom of the boat. Sandblasting the bottom of the boat makes quick work of removing any residual buildup and anti-fouling and barrier coat that would take a lot of time to remove by hand. Point number 4 to take away from a project like this is to pick a product that you know how to use, a product that is well liked by the boatyards where you work. That means that it's probably been tried and tested and proven to work in your area. So in this case, we chose to use Interlux rather than a generic or lower brand, because we were sure that by using an Interlux product and by using their manufacturer recommendations that we would get a good end result. I think the fifth most important situation here that we have to pay attention to is the anti-fouling to Inner Protect coat. It's very important not to skip the manufacturer's recommendations when applying your anti-fouling over the Inner Protect barrier coat. There's been a lot of horror stories of people taking too much time when applying their anti-fouling and then finding out that the anti-fouling is flaking off of the boat after one season in the water. And what happens is the barrier coat dries hard and has an amine blush, which is almost like a wax that floats to the surface of the paint. And if that happens, then the paint won't stick to that. The anti-fouling won't stick to that, and you have to come in and sand that out. If the window is still open, if the paint is still open to the second coat, which that means is it hasn't hardened all the way and the amine blush is still solvent, it can still be painted over.
For more information on removing bottom paint, epoxy coating your hull, and selecting an anti-fouling paint, I encourage you to browse the following links, which offer a sample of the research that subscribers to Practical Sailor can access in our extensive archives. If you like what you read, want the best gear for your boat, but within your budget, and like the idea of supporting ad-free, independent testing, I invite you to subscribe to Practical Sailor at www.practical-sailor.com. For Practical Sailor Magazine, I'm Tim Cole. Thanks for watching.